At 8:15 a.m. on August 6, 1945, the sky over Hiroshima ignited. In a fraction of a second, tens of thousands of lives were erased by a single blinding flash of light. Tsutomu Yamaguchi was walking toward the train station when he saw two small parachutes fall from a B-29 bomber. He survived the immediate blast, crawled to a shelter, and eventually boarded a train home, to Nagasaki. To understand how this reality came to be, we have to look back to July 1945. Allied forces were actively planning a massive naval blockade of the Japanese mainland, to be followed by a full-scale ground invasion. Strategists estimated that campaign could result in over 1 million American casualties. Faced with these staggering casualty projections, military leaders and officials like Secretary of War Henry Stimson turned to a highly classified alternative. Inside the Pentagon, it was known simply as S-1. The atomic bomb offered a brutal mathematical trade. It allowed military planners to bypass a protracted ground war and force a rapid surrender through the targeted destruction of entire cities. The Manhattan Project produced two distinct types of bombs. The first, codenamed Little Boy, relied on a relatively simple gun-type mechanism. It fired one subcritical mass of enriched uranium into another to trigger a nuclear chain reaction. The second design, Fat Man, utilized a core of plutonium. It was far more efficient, but required a massive, bulbous casing to house a highly complex firing mechanism. That mechanism relied on implosion. Inside, 32 specially shaped explosive lenses surrounded a solid sphere of plutonium. Detonating these lenses simultaneously creates a spherical shockwave that drives inward. This crushes the plutonium core to twice its normal density, achieving the supercritical state needed for fission. On July 26th, Allied leaders issued an ultimatum from the Potsdam Conference demanding unconditional surrender. The Japanese premier dismissed the declaration, stating it was unworthy of public notice. That rejection finalized the military timetable. The experimental devices tested in the New Mexico desert were loaded onto aircraft bound for the Pacific. The navigator's log from the Enola Gay reads like a routine flight record. At 09:15 a.m. Tinian time, the bombardier released Little Boy. The crew watched it fall for 43 seconds. The resulting blast killed between 70 and 80,000 people instantly. The explosion generated a massive column of smoke and radioactive debris that climbed tens of thousands of feet into the atmosphere. On the ground, the pressure wave crushed load-bearing brick and concrete structures for miles. Following the shockwave, a massive firestorm swept through the flattened remains, consuming over 4 square miles of the city. Those who survived the initial blast, the hypoxia, soon began to experience symptoms doctors had never seen. Survivors coughed up black bubbles and bled from their gums, as acute radiation poisoning destroyed their internal organs, while others endured severe, disfiguring thermal burns. The casualties also included thousands of Korean conscripts forced into labor by the Japanese Empire, along with a dozen American prisoners of war held in the city. The clinical precision of the military planning ended the moment the bomb detonated. The strategic objective collapsed into a sprawling catastrophe of structural ruin and biological decay. Even as reports of total annihilation emerged from Hiroshima, the Supreme War Council in Tokyo remained deadlocked. Military leaders refused to concede defeat. With no surrender forthcoming, the U.S. military accelerated its schedule. Scientists and engineers worked frantically to assemble the Fat Man plutonium core, preparing a second strike just 3 days later. The primary target for August 9th was the city of Kokura, but heavy smoke and ground haze completely obscured the aiming point. Running critically low on fuel, the pilot of the B-29 bomber boxcar pivoted to his secondary target. At 11:02 a.m., Fat Man exploded over the Utakami Valley in Nagasaki. The blast wiped out nearly 2 square miles and killed another 40,000 people instantly. The reality of a second destroyed city shattered the deadlock in Tokyo. Breaking long-established custom, Emperor Hirohito intervened directly, stating he wished to accept the Allied terms. The United States only had 2 bombs ready to drop, but the Japanese leadership did not know that. The terrifying prospect of an endless sequence of nuclear strikes finally broke their will to resist. Weeks after the surrender, investigators with the United States Strategic Bombing Survey drove jeeps through the silent, pulverized streets of Hiroshima. They carried bilingual forms on clipboards, stopping traumatized residents in the rubble to ask them precisely how they felt about the atomic bomb, attempting to quantify the psychological impact of the weapon. Their data revealed the bomb's unique lethality. This snap shows the blast effects radiating outward, total structural collapse near the center, surrounded by rings of thermal damage, and an invisible, lasting wave of ionizing radiation that would alter survivor DNA for generations. The danger of this new science extended back to the laboratories in America. At Los Alamos, a subcritical plutonium sphere, later named the Demon Core, was involved in 2 separate fatal accidents, emitting a deadly flash of blue light when scientists carelessly triggered runaway chain reactions. The global conflict officially concluded on September 2nd, as Japanese delegates signed the Instrument of Surrender aboard the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay. The bombs achieved their immediate military objective, but they also introduced a permanent, lingering dread of atomic energy. Decades later, historians continue to debate the decision to drop the bombs. Some argue it was a harsh necessity that saved millions of lives by avoiding a protracted invasion. Others contend the Japanese were already nearing collapse, and that President Truman deployed the weapons largely to intimidate the Soviet Union and assert American dominance in the post-war world. The most enduring records of that strategy are etched directly into the stone of Hiroshima. The intense thermal radiation bleached the surrounding concrete, leaving behind the dark, permanent shadows of vaporized citizens. Those shadows are a static reminder of a threat that has grown exponentially. Today, the global arsenal consists of thousands of active nuclear warheads, each vastly more powerful than the devices dropped in 1945. For decades, the dwindling population of Hibakusha have shared their stories, warning the world that the horrors they endured could easily be repeated on a global scale. The countdown that began over Hiroshima never stopped. The capacity for total human annihilation is now a permanent, defining condition of our modern world.